When dealing with UVs in SketchUp, it's not something the everyday SketchUp user needs to consider or worry about. However, if you're a 3D Max user or certainly a Unreal user, UV maps are crucial for light mapping and for baking textures. If you can get a proper texture map in SketchUp first, it's going to make the light mapping much more realistic and much more efficient inside of Unreal. So to sample this, let's just first go to the 3D warehouse. So we're going to go to Window, 3D warehouse, and I'm going to do a search here for Swan Chair. So I just want something curvature. And maybe I'll download this one here is fine. I'll go ahead and click download. We'll load this directly into the model. Take a couple seconds to download, and then we'll click to sort of set it in the model. If you've been using SketchUp, you'll notice trying to map something, textures like this, can sometimes feel impossible. If I double click inside of this object and click on the paint bucket, click on the material, usually some users will get something like that. So if I go to hidden geometry, you're going to see that SketchUp isn't naturally trying to UV it correctly. So we really want it to look like this, but generally when SketchUp users apply materials on curved surfaces, it usually looks something like this. So what I want to do first, let me turn hidden geometry off, is I'm going to click back on the default material. So Sketch UV works best if you just start with a default material, because then it overrides it with a UV grid that you can use to understand how the patterning is actually working. So we'll just apply that back to simple shape. And I'm just going to draw with the rectangle tool and push pull just a little box over here so that we can see it in that shape as well. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm either going to click on the Sketch UV tool here, or you can also find it under extensions, Sketch UV, and then click Sketch UV. The first thing you want to do is you want to click the select tool and you want to pre-select the surfaces that you want to UV wrap. So I'm going to double click so that it's selecting this whole surface. I'm just going to orbit around, make sure it's all connected, which it looks like it is. And then I'm going to click the Sketch UV mapping tool. Because I set this as a default material, what I want to do now is right click anywhere on the surface, and I get a couple options in which I can use to map this. A planar map is basically taking my camera position right now and more or less sort of projecting it. And that's actually pretty similar to what was done in the original shape of this file. So I'm going to undo that. When I click on the tool, you'll also notice there are some options. For example, if I click and drag, I'm actually tilting and shifting to kind of set up my position within this view. I want to angle this and really get straight on in the model and something like that. So that now when I right click and do planar map, you're going to see it's going to project. Now you will get some distortion. You're going to see it here. It's not the best way of doing it for this specific object, but that's something I'm willing to deal with. You can see it's projecting it a little bit more, but generally where you're going to see it most is going to look pretty good there. Now you can also right click and you can do a spherical map. This is also could be an option, but it's going to look a little weird on the chair. If it had a cushion underneath or a cushion over top that was a separate piece, it could hide some of that. We could also use a cylindrical one, which again is going to be really weird for there. And then the last one is a tube map, and as well as a box map. But the tube map, the way that works is you have to first click on a point and then one of the segments of that edge. So you're essentially aligning your sort of center point. And then when you right click and select tube map, it will try to drape it in that position. Usually better for like a cylinder, but I don't think it's going to work in this example here. So there's probably just some geometry issues there. Over here in the box, you can see the same idea. If I click on the tool, click planar, it's going to do that. Spherical. Box is literally just going to drape it. So sometimes just doing box on some of these is a great way to reconnect and drape the material. The one thing to understand, regardless of what way you use this tool, let me turn off hidden geometry and re-planar this. Again, the most important thing you want to do here is to make sure you save the map. Because if I click on the material and apply it, it's not going to load and retain this exact map. Also, if the scale of the material is off, you can lower it. When I click on that tool, see where it says proceed with times or divide to scale? If I do ×2 and hit enter, you're going to see it reduces the mapping by 2. So I can do ×4 and hit enter. And this here is basically a tile of the material here. So based off of your object, you may want to set these specific to that material. I'm just going to undo and leave it at this one here. Once you have your UV mapping set, right-click and save the UV. So this just sort of caches it for this object. So now I'm going to click on the material that I want to apply. I'm going to apply it onto that surface, and it looks wrong. Click back on the Sketch UV, right-click, and now load the UVs. And it's going to bring that back. So the good thing is we loaded the UVs correctly. The bad thing is it's just a bad texture. It's not a seamless texture, which is why we're getting all of these errors here. So they probably cheated here and just really kind of increased the size of this and maybe the position of it so that you didn't catch any of those seams. Yeah, that's exactly what they did. So that came up a little bit higher. But you still get the idea. You can use the Sketch UV map really to get the texture positioned and oriented the way that you like, and then that way it's going to look better once it's in Unreal. So those are just some quick extensions that you can take a look at to really kind of help clean up your SketchUp model. There's certainly some other ones as well that are always useful, and usually any sort of search engine search for SketchUp UV wrapping. There's an extension called Wrap R. There's another material tools within the extension warehouse. So certainly take a look, not only in the 4 that I showed here, but in other ones as well. Now that we have the model nice and clean, we can finish up here and actually take a look at some basic techniques inside of Unreal Engine.